The rain was relentless that night, falling in sheets that turned Michigan Avenue into a river of silver and sorrow. Headlights blurred in the downpour, and the steel skeleton of the L train above screamed against the tracks as it thundered past. Beneath that roar stood a little girl, barefoot, soaked, trembling, but with a spirit that refused to bow. Maya Delgado's thin fingers gripped a guitar almost twice her size, its wood swollen from years of street corners and cold nights. She stood on a flattened cardboard box that sagged under the rain, her dark hair plastered to her forehead, her small frame lit by the flicker of neon signs reflecting off puddles. She opened her mouth, and through the chaos came a voice that didn't belong to the storm. "You are my sunshine, my only sunshine." The sound carried like a fragile flame in the wind, flickering but unextinguished. People hurried past with umbrellas and coats pulled tight, yet one by one they slowed. Something in that child's voice stopped them, a trembling blend of innocence and desperation that reached a part of them the city had long numbed. Coins clinked into the open cap at her feet, the dull music of compassion in a city too often deaf to pain. Just across from her, under the shadow of a crumbling awning, Rosa Delgado pressed a frayed scarf to her lips to stifle a cough that shook her body. Each breath felt like it scraped her lungs raw. She tried to smile when Maya glanced her way, tried to look strong, but her fingers trembled as she pulled her worn coat tighter. She didn't want her daughter to see the truth, that the sickness had grown worse. That every note Maya sang wasn't just for survival. It was a race against time. Above them, a billboard flickered to life. The smiling face of Daniel Whitaker, billionaire philanthropist and judge of American Star, looked down over the street. The tagline glowed, "Where dreams become destiny." His perfect grin glistened through the rain. Maya didn't look up, she never did, but the man on that giant screen was more than a stranger selling hope. He was her father, though she didn't know it. And he, 1,000 miles away in Los Angeles, had no idea that his lost daughter was singing under a bridge for spare change. A gust of wind whipped across the street, carrying rain sideways. Maya kept singing, her small voice trembling but steady. "You'll never know, dear, how much I love you." She hit a note that cracked but didn't fall apart. And in that imperfection was something raw and real enough to hush the crowd. An older man in a damp trench coat stopped nearby, harmonica hanging from a leather cord around his neck. He listened quietly until the final line faded into the rain. When Maya lowered her guitar, shivering, the man approached with a slow nod. "Songbird," he said softly, his voice worn and warm. "You got more soul in you than most men twice my age." Maya blinked up at him, unsure how to respond. He smiled faintly and pulled a small felt guitar pick from his pocket. It looked ordinary, edges frayed, color faded, but he held it out like a gift of royalty. "Here, this one's got stories in it. Maybe it'll help you write yours." Her tiny fingers closed around it. "Thank you, sir," she whispered, her voice barely a breath. "I'm saving up. My mom needs medicine." Something flickered in his eyes. Sadness, pride, maybe both. He tipped his hat, rain sliding down his weathered face. "Then keep singing, little one. Sometimes the world only listens when it rains." He walked off into the darkness, his harmonica echoing behind him, a low, trembling note that melted into the storm. Maya looked down at the pick, turning it over in her palm as if it carried magic. She tucked it into her coat pocket and looked toward her mother, who stood swaying slightly under the awning. "Mom," she called softly. "Did you hear that?" "He called me Songbird," Rosa smiled faintly through the haze of exhaustion. "Then sing, my little songbird," she whispered hoarsely. "Sing louder than the rain." Maya lifted her guitar again, the cold biting her fingers, but the sound that followed was pure light in the dark. The people who had stopped to watch didn't know her name, didn't know her story, but they knew this much. The song of a little girl was cutting through the storm, and somewhere far away, fate had just started listening. By morning, the rain had turned to mist, softening the hard edges of Chicago's skyline. The streets smelled of wet asphalt and coffee. Maya Delgado sat on the edge of her narrow bed, guitar across her knees, her bare feet swinging just above the cold floor. Her fingers were red and raw from playing all night, but she didn't seem to notice. She was humming softly, half lullaby, half promise. Rosa lay on the other bed, her thin frame barely outlined under a blanket that couldn't keep the chill out. Every few minutes she coughed, a deep, shattering sound that made Maya's heart twist. The room was a box, its wallpaper peeling like old paper left in the rain. A tiny heater rattled in the corner, more noise than warmth. On the wall above Rosa's bed hung a faded photograph. Rosa at 20, smiling beside a man in a tuxedo. Maya had always wondered about him, but Rosa never said his name. She just called him a song that ended too soon. This morning, Rosa's cough was worse. Maya rushed to fill a cup from the sink and held it to her lips. "Drink, Mama," she whispered. Rosa smiled weakly, her lips trembling against the rim. "You should be in school, not taking care of me," she said between breaths. "One day you'll sing somewhere warm, somewhere people listen because they love you, not because they pity you." Maya shook her head. "I already have somewhere to sing." She reached into her coat pocket and unfolded a crumpled flyer she had found the night before. Soaked but still legible. American Star Auditions, Los Angeles, Dolby Theater. Prize, $1,000. Her small finger traced the bold print as if touching a doorway to another world. "If I win this, Mama, you'll get your medicine, a real house, everything." Rosa's smile faded. "Sweetheart, that's on the other side of the country." "I know," Maya said quickly, "but maybe someone can help us. I can sing on buses, at rest stops. People always listen when I sing." Rosa looked at her daughter, her heart torn between fear and pride. She remembered the man from that photograph, the way he used to talk about chasing dreams, then chasing money, and finally leaving both behind. "Dreams can be heavy, mi amor," she whispered. "Be careful how many you carry." But Maya's eyes burned bright. "Then I'll just carry one." Outside, the world began to wake. The muffled honk of taxis, the rumble of trains, and a distant church bell tolling 7. Maya stood and crossed to the window, watching steam rise from the street grates. The city felt huge, but she wasn't afraid. She touched the felt guitar pick hanging from a string around her neck, the gift from Mr. Hollis, and whispered, "You said I have soul. Let's see if soul can buy time." Later that morning, she went down to the corner diner with her guitar case. The manager frowned when she asked to play inside, so she took her spot outside the door instead. She sang "You Are My Sunshine" again, her voice filling the air between raindrops still hanging in the cold. This time, more people stopped. A woman in a nurse's uniform pressed $1 into her hand. A young man with coffee gave her his muffin. By the time she returned home, her cap held 9 crumpled bills and a few coins. She laid them carefully on the nightstand beside her mother. "It's a start," she said. Rosa touched her daughter's cheek, eyes glistening. "You shouldn't have to be the grown-up," she whispered. "I'm just being your sunshine," Maya said, smiling through exhaustion. That night, thunder rolled again in the distance, but inside their small room, something new was growing. A fragile hope, stubborn and bright. Maya practiced quietly as Rosa drifted in and out of sleep. Between chords, she stared at the flyer taped to the wall, its edges curling in the damp. "Los Angeles," she whispered, the word like a song she didn't know yet. "We're coming." Outside, a streetlight flickered, casting their shadow against the wall. The silhouette of a mother and daughter, one fading, the other rising, both bound by music and the desperate belief that somewhere beyond the rain, a miracle was waiting. The sky above Chicago was bruised purple the morning they left. A thin fog clung to the streets, curling around bus tires and empty coffee cups. Maya's heart thumped like a drum as she helped her mother down the steps of the Greyhound station, one arm around her frail shoulders, the other clutching her old guitar. Rosa tried to smile, but the effort looked painful. She kept glancing back at the city, as if some invisible thread were pulling her home. The ticket agent had looked doubtful when Maya handed him the wrinkled bills they'd saved. "Los Angeles?" he said, glancing at the little girl and her shivering mother. "That's a long way for a pair of angels with no wings." But when Rosa coughed into her scarf, his tone softened. He tore off 2 tickets and whispered, Godspeed. They found seats near the back where the heater rattled and the air smelled faintly of diesel and cheap coffee. The bus lurched forward and Maya pressed her forehead to the window, watching the skyline shrink behind them, the dark towers, the river glinting like broken glass, the billboard of Daniel Whitaker fading into the mist. The man's face was the last thing she saw of Chicago, smiling down from that giant screen, promising dreams to strangers who could afford them. As the miles slipped past, Rosa dozed fitfully, her head resting against Maya's shoulder. Every few minutes, her chest hitched, a soft wheeze escaping her lips. Maya tried to stay still, afraid to wake her, but the sound of that labored breathing carved a hole in her heart. She reached into her pocket and touched the felt guitar pick, her good luck charm, and whispered to herself, "We'll make it, Mama. I'll sing loud enough for both of us." By the second day, the road blurred into endless motion. Gas stations, cornfields, flickering rest stops lit by vending machines. Maya played her guitar quietly at each stop, her small hands strumming soft melodies that made tired travelers pause between coffee refills and broken dreams. Some gave her quarters, others gave her smiles. One old woman pressed a peanut butter sandwich into her hand and said, "For the voice that could melt winter." But Nebraska brought a test she never expected. Inside a bright rest stop with humming fluorescent lights, Rosa collapsed near the vending machines. One moment she was standing. The next, her knees buckled and the sound of her cough turned wet and frightening. Maya screamed for help. People rushed forward, their faces blurring through her tears. A nurse named Kesha, a woman with soft brown eyes and hands that seemed born for saving, knelt beside Rosa. "She's dehydrated," she said, pulling a small water bottle from her bag. "When was her last real meal?" Maya shook her head, speechless. Kesha looked between mother and daughter, her expression softening. "You're traveling far?" "Los Angeles," Maya whispered. "For a singing contest. I have to win. It's the only way." Something flickered across Kesha's face. Disbelief, then compassion. She scribbled a note on the back of her ticket stub and pressed it into Maya's hand. "If she gets worse, go straight to Cedars-Sinai Hospital in Los Angeles. Don't wait. Show this to the nurses' station." Rosa stirred, her eyes fluttering open. "We can't stop now," she murmured. "We're so close," Kesha sighed, brushing the hair from Rosa's damp forehead. "Then promise me you'll be careful." When the bus pulled away again, Maya tucked the note deep inside her guitar case, next to the pick. Outside, the landscape stretched into golden fields and long shadows. The sky seemed endless, a canvas waiting for something divine. That night, as the bus rolled through the desert, Maya couldn't sleep. She took out her guitar and strummed softly, singing to the rhythm of the road. The driver smiled in the rearview mirror but said nothing. Her voice filled the dim space, quiet, trembling, full of ache. "You are my sunshine, my only sunshine." Her mother stirred and whispered faintly, "That song again?" Maya smiled through her tears. "It keeps the fear away." Rosa turned her face toward her daughter, the motion slow and tender. "Then keep singing, baby. Keep the night from swallowing us." As dawn broke over the California border, the world changed colors, gold spilling over mountains, dust shimmering in the new light. Maya's voice finally faded, and for a moment, everything felt still. The girl with the oversized guitar, the dying mother, the note tucked in a case, all of them carried by fate toward a city that didn't know their names. When Los Angeles finally appeared on the horizon, glowing like a promise too bright to be real, Maya whispered, "We made it, Mama." And though Rosa couldn't speak, a single tear slipped down her cheek, half pride, half fear. Neither of them knew that somewhere beneath that same California sky, a man named Daniel Whitaker was rehearsing lines for his next television episode, unaware that the voice destined to change his life was already speeding toward him on a bus full of strangers and dreams. Los Angeles greeted them with sunlight so sharp it felt unreal. The air smelled of salt, exhaust, and something electric, possibility maybe. The bus hissed to a stop outside the downtown terminal, and Maya blinked against the brightness. She had imagined California so many times from their damp Chicago room. Golden streets, kind faces, miracles waiting at every corner. But the city was bigger, faster, louder than she dreamed. Cars roared like beasts, people moved in a rush, and billboards screamed promises of fame that felt galaxies away from the child clutching a guitar in her small, shaking hands. Rosa stepped down slowly, gripping the rail for balance. Her scarf hid the gray creeping into her hair and the bruise-colored shadows beneath her eyes. "We made it," she whispered, forcing a smile. But her knees wobbled, and Maya caught her just before she stumbled. They stood there, mother and daughter, two tiny silhouettes against a skyline built for giants. "Let's see the ocean first," Rosa said softly. "If I see it once, maybe I'll remember what breathing feels like." So they went. They walked for hours, stopping often so Rosa could rest, until the city opened to the wide horizon of Santa Monica Pier. The Pacific shimmered beneath them, wild and endless. Waves crashed with a rhythm older than sorrow. Rosa leaned on the railing, her fingers gripping the worn wood as if afraid the wind might steal her away. Maya set her guitar case down and sat cross-legged near her mother. She began to play. Her small voice rose above the gulls and the laughter of tourists. It wasn't loud, but it was the kind of sound that pulled people to stillness. Strangers turned, drawn by something they couldn't name. A couple paused hand in hand. A little boy stopped crying mid-sob. Even the ocean seemed to hush between waves. A man with a camera stood nearby, filming B-roll for a travel show. "Get this," he murmured to his cameraman. "There's something about that kid." The lens focused, catching Maya's soaked sneakers, the threadbare jacket, and the fierce, unbreakable determination in her eyes. Among the crowd, another man slowed his pace, a tall figure in a dark coat, sunglasses, and a phone pressed to his ear. He was talking numbers, schedules, sponsorships. But the moment Maya hit the second verse, his words faltered. His hand dropped. The melody, simple, trembling, impossibly pure, reached through the noise like a ghost. Daniel Whitaker froze. He couldn't explain why. Something in that child's tone, its tremor, its honesty, stirred a memory he'd spent years burying. A woman's laughter. A nursery-painted choral. A baby gripping his finger with a fist too small for regret. The echo of a lullaby sung long ago. His throat tightened, and before he could think, he ended the call. For one fleeting moment, he just stood there, watching the girl on the pier. The wind lifted her hair, and sunlight caught in the tears she didn't know she was shedding. He took a step closer, then stopped. The ache in his chest was sharp, almost unbearable. He turned abruptly, retreating into the crowd, convincing himself it was nothing, just another street singer with a decent voice. Maya never saw him leave. She was lost in the song, lost in the promise that music could be her mother's medicine. When she finished, a man dressed as a magician approached and pulled a coin from behind her ear. "For luck, little star," he said with a wink, placing it in her palm. Maya laughed, holding it up for her mother to see. Rosa smiled faintly, though her lips were pale. They counted the tips that night in a cheap motel room off Sunset Boulevard. $27 and some change, enough for dinner and 2 nights of shelter. Rosa sat on the edge of the bed, coughing softly into her scarf. Maya tore her burrito in half, setting the bigger piece beside her. "Eat, Mama! Tomorrow's the big day." "The big day," Rosa echoed, her voice trembling between pride and fear. She looked at her daughter, the light in her eyes, the stubborn hope, and felt a strange ache in her chest. It wasn't the illness this time. It was love too deep for words. When Maya fell asleep, the silver coin resting near her pillow, Rosa stayed awake. She traced her daughter's small hand and whispered, "Please let her be seen. Let someone finally see her." Outside, Hollywood glittered and hummed. The city was a machine built on dreams, most of them broken before sunrise. But in that tiny room, a mother's prayer carried through the night, weaving through neon and smog until it reached, unknowingly, the penthouse window of Daniel Whitaker. He stood there, glass of whiskey in hand, the echo of a child's voice still haunting him. He couldn't shake it. The purity, the pain, the impossible familiarity. He closed his eyes, and for the first time in years, he didn't see money or fame or lights. He saw a small, coral-painted room and a baby's smile. And somewhere deep in his chest, something cracked open. Something he thought he'd buried forever. Morning came to Los Angeles like a promise wrapped in gold. The sky burned pale orange over the palm trees, and the city stirred with its usual chorus of engines, chatter, and dreams chasing time. In a modest motel room near Sunset Boulevard, Maya woke to the sound of her mother's coughing. It was sharp and hollow, like paper tearing in the dark. She sat up instantly, clutching the guitar that slept beside her, as if music itself could keep the world from breaking. Rosa tried to smile through the pain. "You need to eat, little bird," she whispered, her voice thin but tender. Maya tore off a piece of the stale bread they'd saved and handed it over. "Only if you do too," she said. Rosa took it, but her hand trembled so badly the crumbs fell onto the blanket. "You sing today," she murmured. "Remember, don't fight the fear. Find the breath." Those were the same words Mr. Hollis had told her back in Chicago, and hearing them now made Maya straighten. "I'll win, Mama," she said, trying to sound older than she was. "I'll win so you don't have to hurt anymore." They left the motel as the city began to shimmer with late morning light. Rosa wore her best scarf, the one with faded roses, hiding the sharpness of her collarbones. Maya carried her guitar like it was a piece of her soul. The streets grew louder as they approached the heart of Hollywood, crowds buzzing around, cars honking, camera crews setting up. Then, rising like a cathedral of dreams, the Dolby Theater appeared before them. Its glass doors reflected sunlight and ambition, and for a moment Maya just stood there, overwhelmed by the sheer size of it. "How can my voice fill something that big?" she whispered. Rosa reached out, placing a trembling hand on her shoulder. "A stage is just another sidewalk," she said softly, "and you've already conquered that." Inside, the air vibrated with nerves and excitement. Contestants of every shape and style filled the hallways. Dancers stretching, singers humming, someone in a sequined suit reciting their lines to a mirror. Maya clutched her wristband, marked A43, her number for destiny. She felt impossibly small among the glitter and perfection. But when she saw a boy juggling backstage to calm his nerves, she smiled. Everyone, no matter how grown up, was scared before the lights. A production assistant with a headset knelt beside her. "You're Maya, right?" he said, grinning. "I'm Noah. I'll walk you to the stage when they call your number. Don't worry, if you drop your mic, I'll pick it up. Deal?" She nodded, grateful for the kindness. Meanwhile, in a private dressing room 2 floors above, Daniel Whitaker adjusted his tie in the mirror. He'd been doing this for years, judging, critiquing, turning talent into television. But today felt strange. His reflection looked tired. The memory of the girl on the pier kept replaying in his mind, her voice cutting through the noise like truth itself. He couldn't shake the ache in his chest. He had dreamt about her face all night, and when he awoke, there was a certainty he couldn't explain, as if fate had circled back to collect a debt he'd long ignored. When the judges were introduced on stage, cameras flashed. Daniel smiled on cue, his public mask flawless. The crowd roared. The show began. Hours passed as hopeful singers took the stage, some dazzling, some faltering. Then, the announcer's voice rang out. "Contestant number A43, Maya Delgado." From the side curtain, she saw the glowing stage lights spill like sunrise across the floor. Noah crouched beside her, adjusting her mic. "You got this," he whispered. "Just sing for the person who matters most." She nodded, her small hands trembling as she gripped her guitar. Then the doors opened and she stepped into the blinding light. The stage felt enormous, a sea of darkness beyond the first few rows. 3 judges sat behind a long curved desk. Jessica Lee, the country star with kind eyes, Ariel Stone, the sharp-tongued Broadway producer, and between them, Daniel Whitaker, the man from the billboard. He looked up as Maya walked into the spotlight. Something flickered behind his practiced expression. Her name, Delgado, hit him like thunder. He leaned forward slightly, studying her face. Jessica smiled warmly. "Hello, sweetheart. What's your name?" "Maya Delgado," she said softly. "And why are you here today?" Ariel asked, tapping his pen against the table. Maya swallowed hard. "My mama's sick. I sing on the streets to help her. But if I win this," her voice cracked, "I can save her." A silence fell. Cameras zoomed in on her trembling hands, her small frame standing before the world. Jessica's eyes glistened. Even Ariel's pen stopped moving. Daniel sat motionless. His heartbeat thundered in his ears. Delgado. Rosa Delgado. Could it be? Jessica leaned forward. "And what will you sing for us, darling?" Maya took a deep breath. "My mama's favorite. You Are My Sunshine." Daniel's hand froze. His eyes widened just slightly, the world narrowing to that single sentence. He had once sung that same song, long ago, to a newborn with eyes like hers. "Whenever you're ready," Jessica said gently. Maya adjusted her guitar strap, closed her eyes, and began to sing. The first note was soft, trembling. "You are my sunshine, my only sunshine." Her voice carried across the theater, fragile and luminous. By the second verse, it was no longer just a song. It was a prayer. A lifeline stretching from her to her mother, to every broken place in her heart. The audience grew silent. Jessica pressed a hand to her lips. Ariel leaned forward. But Daniel's composure shattered. Every note peeled back another layer of memory. Rosa's laughter. The nursery-painted coral. The way he'd left, chasing fame, running from responsibility. Now that voice, his daughter's voice, was calling him home. When she finished the last line, the theater stood still, breathless. The world had shifted, and in Daniel Whitaker's chest, something long dead had just begun to beat again. The silence that followed Maya's final note was almost sacred. The lights seemed to hold their breath with everyone else. Then, like a slow sunrise, the first sound broke through. Applause. It began in the back row, hesitant and small, then grew into a storm that shook the theater. Jessica Lee wiped her eyes openly, whispering, "My God, that child." Ariel Stone exhaled through his teeth, shaking his head, his usual cynicism stripped away. But Daniel Whitaker didn't move. He sat frozen, one hand gripping the edge of the table so tightly his knuckles were white. He had built his life around control, contracts, cameras, perfect timing. Yet here, under the glare of stage lights, everything inside him was breaking apart. That voice, that name, that face. Every piece of evidence screamed the truth he had buried. The girl standing on that stage was his daughter. He rose abruptly, muttering, "I need a moment." The scrape of his chair echoed louder than the applause. The crowd fell to a confused hush as he walked off stage, the camera cutting away. Backstage, he leaned against a cold concrete wall, his breath shaking. An assistant followed, concerned. "Mr. Whitaker, are you okay?" "Find out everything about contestant number A43, he rasped. "Maya Delgado, her file, her background. I want it now." Within minutes, a folder appeared in his trembling hands. He opened it, and there she was. Rosa Delgado, formerly Rosa Martinez. His Rosa. The file listed unpaid medical bills, years of hospital visits, and a birth certificate dated 7 years ago. The father's name field was blank. Daniel closed his eyes, and in that emptiness, he saw the life he'd walked away from, the woman who sang to him in small cafes, who believed in love more than money, who cried the night he left to chase television glory. He sank into the nearest chair, the sound of Maya's song still echoing inside him like punishment. "You are my sunshine, my only sunshine," he whispered to no one. "Oh God, what have I done?" Meanwhile, Maya stood center stage, her small hands gripping her guitar strap. The audience waited for the verdict. Jessica leaned into her mic first. "That was one of the most heartfelt performances I've ever seen," she said gently. "It's a yes from me." Ariel nodded, his voice steady but emotional. "You sing with your soul, young lady." "That's rare, yes." All eyes turned to Daniel's empty chair. the audience murmured. Producers whispered behind the curtains. Jessica smiled reassuringly at Maya. Don't worry, sweetheart. Sometimes a judge just needs a minute. Maya forced a small smile, though her heart pounded with uncertainty. She looked toward the wings, hoping for her mother's familiar face. Rosa sat off stage, her eyes shining with tears of pride and worry. She mouthed, "You did it, mi amor." A few minutes later, Daniel returned. His eyes were red-rimmed, his composure brittle but intact. He took his seat, the file still clutched under the desk. The crowd quieted. Jessica gestured for him to speak. Daniel cleared his throat, his voice low, almost trembling. "Maya," he said, "if you could have anything in the world, what would it be?" The little girl blinked, confused by the question. "For my mama to get better," she answered simply. That single sentence tore through him. He swallowed hard, forcing a smile. "Then I have nothing else to add," he said softly. "Except yes. 1,000 times yes." The audience erupted again, but Daniel barely heard it. All he could see was Rosa's face at the edge of the curtain. Pale, thinner than he remembered, but unmistakable. She hadn't seen him yet. He wasn't ready. Not here, not like this. After the show, as Maya and her mother left the stage, producers surrounded them with congratulations and release forms. Rosa's smile was faint, her steps shaky. Maya noticed the way she leaned against the wall for balance, her fingers trembling. "Mama?" she whispered. "I'm fine, baby," Rosa said, though her voice wavered. Just a little tired, but she wasn't fine. The next day, Rosa collapsed in the motel bathroom. Maya screamed for help, her voice breaking through thin walls. Within minutes, paramedics carried Rosa out on a stretcher, her skin ghostly pale. "Please, please help her," Maya sobbed as the ambulance doors closed. At Cedars-Sinai Hospital, machines beeped in quiet rhythm. Maya sat by her mother's bed, clutching her guitar like a lifeline. "I'll win, Mama," she whispered through tears. "I'll sing louder, I promise." Across town, Daniel Whitaker sat in his penthouse, the city sprawling beneath him like a kingdom he no longer wanted. On his desk lay the hospital's unpaid invoices. His assistant stood by, hesitant. "Sir, what do you want me to do?" Daniel's answer came without hesitation. "Pay it all. Every cent. Get her the best doctors. Tell no one it's from me." He stared out the window, the glow of the city reflecting in his glass. "And make sure the little girl never knows who did it." Not yet. That night, as rain began to fall again over Los Angeles, Maya found the hospital chapel. It was small, quiet, lit by flickering candles. She sat on the front pew, pulled her guitar into her lap, and began to play Amazing Grace. Her voice cracked on the high notes, but the sincerity made even the nurses pause outside the door. One of them recorded it on her phone. By morning, the video was everywhere. Little girl sings for her dying mother, heartbreak in Los Angeles. And while the world wept for the anonymous songbird, Daniel watched it in silence from his penthouse. His heart broke and mended in the same breath. "That's my daughter," he whispered to the empty room. "My sunshine." He didn't know how or when he'd tell her the truth, only that he would. And that this time he wouldn't run, you said. The night of the semifinals arrived cloaked in golden nerves. Los Angeles buzzed under its own halo of light, the air thick with ambition. Limousines rolled past the Dolby Theater, where spotlights carved white blades into the dark sky. But in a small hospital room across town, a different kind of light flickered, the glow of a bedside monitor, steady but fragile. Maya sat beside her mother, her tiny hand clutching Rosa's fingers. Tubes whispered with each breath her mother took. Outside the window, the city glittered like it was mocking them, so alive, while Rosa looked carved from moonlight and exhaustion. "Mama," Maya whispered, "they said I can sing again tonight. But only if you promise you'll listen this time." Rosa smiled faintly, her lips pale against the oxygen tube. "I will, my sunshine," she murmured. "I'll listen from right here." She turned her gaze to the ceiling. "Just make sure they remember you're mine." Hours later, a car arranged by the show whisked Maya to the theater. The producers offered to postpone her performance when they saw her red-rimmed eyes, but she shook her head. "I can't wait." "She can't wait," she said simply, gripping her guitar. Backstage buzzed with chaos, stylists adjusting sequins, cameras blinking, makeup artists brushing powder on trembling faces. Maya stood in her corner, shoes scuffed, hair in loose braids. Noah, the stagehand who'd helped her at the audition, crouched beside her again. "You ready, superstar?" he asked gently. Her voice was a whisper. "Only if I don't cry first." "Then cry after," he said, tapping her shoulder with a grin. "You've got a whole city waiting to hear that heart of yours." As the stage manager counted down, Maya stepped into the wings. The audience looked like an ocean of light, endless and blinding. She squinted, then spotted the 3 judges at their table. Jessica Lee smiled warmly, hands clasped under her chin. Ariel Stone nodded, analytical but kind. And in the middle, Daniel Whitaker. She couldn't explain why her chest always tightened when she saw him. There was something in his eyes, something heavy, like he carried her sadness too. Daniel watched her walk out, every muscle in his body trembling with restraint. He had stayed awake the entire night before, pacing between memories. Now, watching her under the lights, he realized he was looking at a reflection of everything he'd thrown away. The music cue began. Maya adjusted her mic, closed her eyes, and sang a new song, one she'd written herself in the hospital waiting room. It was raw and trembling, every lyric a piece of her heart torn out and handed to the crowd. Even the stars get tired. Even the sun needs rest, but love, it never stops burning. Not in my mama's chest. Her voice filled the vast hall like a prayer. People leaned forward, their phones forgotten. Jessica wiped her tears again. Ariel whispered something to the producer beside him, something about lightning in a bottle. But Daniel, he couldn't move. Every word Maya sang hit him with the weight of his absence. His daughter was bleeding her heart onto the stage, and he had no right to it. Yet he couldn't look away. When she sang the final line, "I'll sing until she wakes again," he pressed his hand to his mouth, choking on a sob that never escaped. When the applause thundered, Maya just stood there, shaking. Then she whispered into the mic, "That was for you, Mama. I love you." Back in the hospital, Rosa stirred faintly as a nurse replayed the performance on a small tablet. The sound of Maya's voice seemed to reach her even through sleep. A single tear slid down her cheek. That same night, Daniel received a call. The best surgeon in Los Angeles had performed Rosa Delgado's emergency procedure, and it was successful. She was stable but fragile. The hospital bills had been paid anonymously through a private foundation. Daniel exhaled shakily, feeling his soul loosen. "She's going to make it," he whispered. Thank God. He hung up and looked out the window. The city stretched endlessly beneath him, but for once it didn't look like his kingdom. It looked like her stage. The next morning, news outlets replayed Maya's performance across the country. The little girl who sang for her mother trended everywhere. People called her the voice of courage. Donations flooded in for her mother's recovery. But Maya didn't see the fame. She saw only her mother's hand, warm again, squeezing hers when she whispered, "Mama, we're almost there." That afternoon, a quiet knock came at the hospital door. Rosa thought it was another nurse, but when the door opened, Daniel stood there. No cameras, no entourage, just a man in a simple coat with regret written across his face. He didn't step inside. He just looked at Rosa, his eyes glistening. "I heard her sing," he said softly. She's ours, isn't she?" Rosa stared at him for a long moment. Her lips trembled. "You left before she could say her first word?" Daniel swallowed hard. "I know. And every day since, I've heard her voice in my head anyway." Rosa looked toward Maya, sleeping in the chair beside her bed, clutching the silver coin and felt pick. "Don't wake her," she said quietly. "Let her dream a little longer. She's had enough reality." Daniel's voice broke. "She shouldn't have had to live my mistakes." "Then make them mean something," Rosa said, her eyes softer now. "Don't walk away again." He nodded slowly, stepping closer, but stopped just short of the light pooling from her bedside lamp. "Tomorrow is the final night," he whispered. "She's going to sing again, and this time, the world will hear what I should have never stopped listening to." He looked at Maya one last time, the small rise and fall of her breath, the innocence he had stolen from himself, and whispered, "I'll fix this, Rosa, I swear it." When he left, the rain had begun again, tapping against the hospital glass. Rosa turned her head toward the sound and murmured, "He's changed, mi amor. Maybe miracles don't just happen on stages." And in her sleep, Maya smiled faintly, dreaming of lights, music, and a man she didn't yet know was her father waiting in the front row for her final song. The final night arrived wrapped in a strange, trembling magic. The whole city seemed to hum with expectation. The Dolby Theater shone brighter than ever, its red carpet wet from a light drizzle, the air sharp with camera flashes and whispers. For the world, it was just another finale, another night where dreams were weighed and sold under spotlights. But for Maya Delgado, it was everything. She arrived in a borrowed dress that shimmered faintly under the lights, clutching her guitar like a friend who had never left her side. Her shoes were too big. They'd been given by a costume assistant who couldn't believe the girl with the Sunshine song owned none of her own. Behind her, Rosa was being wheeled in by a nurse, pale but alive. Her eyes glistened with pride and disbelief. Each breath was still a battle, but she refused to miss this night. "Mama," Maya whispered, crouching beside her. "You're really here." Rosa touched her cheek. "I wouldn't miss this for the world, my sunshine," she said softly. "But listen to me, when you sing, don't look at me. Look at the light. Let it carry you." From across the stage, Daniel Whitaker watched quietly. He hadn't slept in days. The guilt, the joy, the terror, all of it mixed into a chaos he couldn't name. Tonight, everything would change. He would no longer hide behind his fame, his cameras, his excuses. Tonight, he would tell her the truth. The audience buzzed with murmurs as the show began. One by one, the other finalists performed, dancers in sequins, singers in glitter, magic acts with fire and flair. But when the host finally called, "Ladies and gentlemen, our final contestant, Maya Delgado," the crowd erupted into applause. Maya stepped out. The lights poured over her like a sunrise. For a moment, she could only hear her own heartbeat. Then she remembered Noah's voice from the wings. "You've already won, kiddo. Now just show them what love sounds like." She took a deep breath, adjusted her mic, and strummed the first chord. "You are my sunshine, my only sunshine." The sound that left her throat wasn't just a voice. It was memory, love, loss, and hope braided into one fragile thread. It soared over the audience, filled the rafters, wrapped around every heart in the room. Rosa closed her eyes, her lips moving silently with every word. Jessica Lee pressed her hand to her chest, openly weeping. Ariel Stone muttered under his breath, "She's not performing. She's praying." But Daniel was unraveling. His mask of composure was gone. Every lyric tore through him. He remembered the lullabies he used to sing to Rosa when life was still simple, before the fame, before the fear of not being enough. He remembered holding a baby once, his baby, and promising her a world he never gave. When Maya reached the final verse, her voice quivered. "You'll never know, dear, how much I love you." The audience leaned in, breathless. Even the cameraman seemed frozen. And then the last line, "Please don't take my sunshine away." A long, aching silence filled the theater. Then came thunderous applause, louder than any before. People stood, cheering, crying, shouting her name. Confetti cannons fired gold and white, but Maya barely noticed. She was scanning the crowd for her mother. Rosa smiled faintly, hand pressed to her chest, tears streaming down her cheeks. Jessica wiped her eyes. "Maya, that was the most beautiful thing I've ever heard," she said into her mic. "You didn't just sing. You gave us a piece of your soul." Ariel nodded, his voice breaking. "If music still means something in this world, it's because of voices like yours." And then, all eyes turned to Daniel. He stood slowly, the weight of 7 years pressing down on his shoulders. The microphone in his hand trembled slightly. The audience grew quiet, sensing something was coming. "Maya," he began, his voice rough, unsteady. "There's something I need to say, not as a judge, but as a man who's been running from the truth." Maya blinked, confused. Rosa froze, her breath catching. Daniel's eyes glistened under the lights. "You sang the same song that a woman once sang to me. The same voice, the same heart. And tonight I realized why. It's because you are hers." "You're ours!" Gasps rippled through the audience. The host's eyes went wide. Maya stood perfectly still, clutching her guitar. What do you mean?" she whispered. He stepped closer to the stage, tears now streaming freely. "You're my daughter, Maya. I'm your father." The crowd erupted in disbelief. Cameras swung wildly. Rosa covered her mouth, sobbing openly. Maya stood frozen, trying to process the words. "You're my dad?" she whispered, her voice cracking. Daniel nodded. "Yes, sweetheart. I made mistakes. I walked away when I shouldn't have. I let ambition blind me. But I've heard you now. I see you, and I will never walk away again." He climbed the steps to the stage, his polished shoes echoing against the boards. The lights caught the tears on his face as he dropped to his knees before her. "I don't expect forgiveness," he said, voice shaking. "I just need you to know the truth." Maya's small hand trembled as she reached out. "Do you promise?" she asked softly. "Do you promise not to leave again?" He pressed her hand against his heart. "For the rest of my life," he whispered. The crowd rose as one, cheering through tears. Rosa's wheelchair was pushed forward by a nurse until she reached the edge of the stage. Daniel turned to her, years of guilt written across his face. "Rosa." She looked at him through tears, voice fragile but steady. "It's not me you need forgiveness from," she said. "It's her." Maya turned toward her mother, then back to her father, her lip trembling. For a long moment, the stage was silent. Then she did what no one expected. She set her guitar down and threw her arms around Daniel's neck. He caught her, breaking down completely, holding her as the audience cried with them. The host, voice trembling, stepped forward. "Ladies and gentlemen, I think we already know who tonight's winner is." Confetti rained down as the theater exploded with applause. Maya looked up at her father through tears. "You said I was your sunshine," she whispered. Daniel smiled through the blur. "You always were." In the front row, Rosa reached out her trembling hand and Daniel took it. For the first time in 7 years, their family was whole. No scripts, no cameras, just truth shining brighter than any spotlight. As the final music swelled and the lights dimmed, the narrator's voice closed the story like a heartbeat. From a rainy street corner in Chicago to the brightest stage in Hollywood, Maya Delgado sang not for fame, but for love. And in doing so, she found something greater than victory. She found her family, her faith, and the kind of light that never fades. That night, when the theater emptied and the cameras stopped rolling, Daniel knelt beside his daughter's sleeping form, whispering softly, "You are my sunshine. My only sunshine." And for the first time in years, he meant every word.